We have two eminent personalities with us, Colonel Mathew Thomas and Mr. Kumar Sethi. For the sake of introduction, Colonel Mathew Thomas, he's the founder of the Citizens Action Forum, which is a Bangalore-based NGO. Prior to this, he was working with the defense sector. He was a former defense officer and a scientist. He did his post-graduation in missile technology from Indian Institute of Sciences, Bangalore. He also received the President's Commendation for services to the defense research. We are happy to have you here, sir. Mr. Kumar Sethi, he has done his doctorate in physics from the University of Delhi. He's a postdoctorate fellow at the Inter-University Center for Astronomy and Astrophysics, Pune. He's a visiting faculty at the Mehta Research Institute, Allahabad, and also a couple of other places. He writes regularly on socio-political issues for the web magazine Sanhati. Both have been doing a lot of research with respect to the AADHAAR. So we'll start off with Colonel Mathew Thomas, and then Kumar Sethi will join the discussion. Over to you, sir.
Gentlemen, I must thank Professor Benson Isaac and Gopika for giving me this opportunity to invite me here. And so nice to see young faces who are interested in newfangled stuff like UID. And it's also very gratifying to have two of us who are sort of called scientists talking on this subject. Scientists generally tend to be somewhat cranky or kinky, and maybe that's why both of us got interested in this subject of UID. I'm also very happy to meet a young girl whom I must have seen when she was in her skirts. Her dad and I were colleagues in DRDO, Defense Research, where he headed the missile manufacturing facility for some time, and I took over from him later. So that's very nice to meet some from the old family. I was also very impressed with one of your students, Gopika, who is instrumental in this. I must thank her. Very rarely have I come across a young person who's so meticulous in logistics and in managing that. And I appreciate her, and I think I would say that probably Professor Benson Isaac's guidance is responsible, and probably all of you are like that. So thank you and congratulations. Now, the topic UID, the good and the bad. There's a question mark after the good to indicate that I don't find anything good in it, but certainly I'll talk of what claims are made for that. The organizers have given me 20 minutes. At 20 minutes, you can't scratch anything, not even the surface of a subject like UID. It's too vast since it concerns all of us. It concerns this entire country. It concerns each one of us, and in a very, very serious way. And therefore, 20 minutes is hardly anything, but we can take this forward. Now, the good and the uses. This is what claims are made by the authority, the UID-AI, Unique Identification Authority of India, that primarily it is promoted as something which will prevent leakages in various welfare measure schemes like PDS, NREGS, LPG, and so on. And the media and maybe the authors themselves use the word, it's a game changer. I don't know which game is being changed. And then one of the advantages is spoken of is targeted benefits and financial inclusion. These are some of the uses or benefits which are talked of. Now, let us look at these things one by one. Preventing welfare leakages. They claim that 1,200 to 12,000 rupees per annum of siphoned off LPG can be prevented if you have this UID database and number. Let me ask you a question, and please feel free to stop me even though I have only 20 minutes at any time and ask me a question. There's also a separate question time. All of you must be using LPG gas at home. Those of you who stay at home, those of you in the hostels, there must be LPG gas in the hostel also. Now, how many cylinders do you consume in a month, or a cylinder lasts for how long? 25 days, 30 days? Any homemaker would know that. Young girls would not. Well, mommy looks after all that, and so does young men. Around a month, month and a half is what a cylinder will last. Now you have got a consumer number. A few months back, the government published an order, illegal order, which said that everybody who wants an LPG cylinder must give their RR number or the electric meter number. And that they thought would pinpoint who is misusing the LPG. Now tell me, what's the difference between a consumer number, which all of us have, and an electric meter number? How would an electric meter number make it any better in terms of preventing misuse or abuse of subsidized LPG? Would it be some of you must have done that. You must have gone and registered with your distributor about your RR number or something. Did anybody do that? Yeah, you've done that. So how do you think it's better? Is it any way better? The government said that they can control leakages. Okay. No, I'm not talking about that. I'm saying you've got a consumer number. You have a cylinder, no? With BP, with Bharat Petroleum or Indian Oil or somebody. Okay, Indian Gas. So you have a consumer number and a contract. So by asking you to give an electric meter number, how would it prevent leakages or misuse of subsidized LPG? Fine. Yeah, that's the justification they have been giving, that the RR number will pinpoint the place where you stay. Now, is that important in deciding whether the cylinder is misused or not? To my mind, it is not. Because a simple thing could tell you whether it's being misused, a consumption pattern. If against a consumer number, you are consuming 20 cylinders in a month, and the norm is, say, a cylinder lasts for a month and a half, then obviously something is wrong. That cylinder is not used for cooking. It's being used for, that connection is used for something else. So by having another number which designates where you live, you're not changing anything. What you should look at is whether against that consumer number, what is the consumption taking place. So these are some of the ridiculous things which people imagine that will help control corruption or some such thing. See, and we tend to get carried away by all these things. Now let us look at PDS. PDS is, you know what is PDS? Public Distribution System. It distributes rations. And one of the great claims being made by UID is that the poor people don't get the thing, and it is being fake ration cards are there. Who makes these fake ration cards? Can a poor person, he can't even make his own genuine ration card, he can't get. How do you expect him to make fake 5, 10 or 20 ration cards? It's a total lack of understanding of the system which results in that. And I must clarify, I am not against the use of technology at all. In fact, both Professor and I we have used technology. I have written programs for manufacture of missiles. I have written scientific programs. I have used technology in many, many ways. In fact, I am a gadget freak. I carry 2 mobiles. I have 3 or 4 laptops. I use all kinds of devices. And I'm not against the use of technology. But technology has its limitations, and we must understand it. You can't use it in many, many social settings. You can't use it. For example, if you try to use software to decide whom you should marry, what will happen? So it's technology. You can use software for many purposes. So coming back to PDS, you look at how many ration shops are there in the country? 6 lakhs ration shops. And a statement was made by the person who is in charge of this project that there will be scanners in each ration shop. The person will come there to collect it. He'll put his fingerprints on the scanner. A query will be sent to the database. The database will inform him through his mobile phone his entitlements and what he has drawn. I mean, what a ridiculous, woolly-headed idea is this? I do not know. Have you been to a ration shop? Have you seen people collecting rations? Usually, one child, a teenage child or less than teen child, comes to collect the rations for 2 or 3 families. Invariably, all the rations are not available there. Now, the child's fingerprint is not there. And are you going to keep scanners in all the 6 lakh shops? Is there going to be connectivity there? What are we trying? I always use a very, very favorite phrase of mine, the fence is eating the cattle, and telling us that branding the cattle will tell them where the corn is going. The fence is eating the corn. The people who are in charge of this thing, they are the people who are stealing all this. And they are saying that we'll give all of you a number, we'll brand you, we'll put you into a database to see who is stealing. And this idea that it can prevent leakages is absolutely silly. It's unworkable. Therefore, it's not that they are not intelligent enough to know it. The people in charge of it know it. Why are they saying it? I mean, you mean say if I can figure it out, or any one of you can figure it out, why is it that the people in the government and the people who are driving this program cannot figure it out? It's so simple. Now I hope we finish that. The UID is a game changer. So what game is it changing? Whose game? How does it change anything at all? I just can't even make out what it is going to change. You're collecting people's data, their biometrics, put it into a database. So what? What will change? Can yours and my life change? Can we get better jobs? Can we get better access to anything? Can you get a railway reservation faster because it's there? Can you commute better? What is it going to change? It's changing nothing. It is merely data in some database. And I don't think it can change anything. Then we talk of targeted benefits. What is this targeted benefit? Well, in fact, there's a Karnataka government circular issued that for government scholarships, you must have the Aadhaar number. See, the UID number does not decide eligibility. A scholarship or a ration is decided on eligibility. It can't even identify properly. Biometrics is not a very, it's a good identifier in certain controlled environment. In large environments, it is a very poor identifier. So when you talk of targeted benefits, it's a double-edged weapon. If I can target you for benefit, I can target you for other things. So it's extremely dangerous to call it for targeting benefits. And why do you want to target for benefits? How can you target anyone for benefits? These are all meaningless, catchy phrases used in media and people who promote this, and virtually it is meaningless. I will show you some pictures and you tell me how you can target those people for any benefit whatsoever. And then lastly, talks of financial inclusion. The circle there has pictures of some of India's poor. What is the financial inclusion you're talking of? Giving these people a bank account? Where the Prime Minister went, Tembli, near that is a place called Nandurbar in Maharashtra, where when they went, 1,400 people were given bank accounts. The accounts were never operated for the last 2 years ever since it was there. How can you operate a bank account when you don't have money? Why should a banker open an account? Because government instruction, the banker may give you an account number. What will you do with that account number? Will these people do anything with a bank account? Even if they say they're going to transfer the NREG wages into them? Is he going to keep the bank account and issue checks? What is he going to do with that? The poor chap doesn't have a meal a day. And these are the people you're talking of financial inclusion. What about economic inclusion? They need jobs. They need some means of earning income. We need the government or whatever welfare is there needs to provide that. And don't say that you give a UID number, I'll get your bank account and you'll get some fancy stuff into that. It cannot happen. Now, the bad part of it, that is the so-called claimed good. I put a question mark and I very briefly answered that. I think 10 minutes is up, so I'll have to rush through. Now, the first thing which I want to talk of is the deceit and the illegality. Why is there deceit? As I told you, the people who are promoting this, first of all, they start by saying that this is a welfare measure. It is not. It is not intended as a welfare measure at all. And they and I and you can easily know it cannot be used for preventing LPG subsidy leakage or PDS or NREGs or anything. Imagine in milestone 235 on the NH7 and some work is being carried on and laborers are there. Will he put his fingerprints on a scanner there and get the money into a bank account? And what are we talking? And they also know that. So it is not meant for this. Then what is it meant for? And that is the deceit. Knowingly promoting something and pulling wool over people's eyes. And I don't want to mince words. What is happening is, there are two forces motivating it. One is the commercial interest. And if we can get demographic data, I can use it for commercial purposes. Like you must have read in the papers, Facebook watches where all you go. Which websites do you open? Then that information is useful for them to sell jeans or hair oil or scholarships or travel or whatever it is. So it has got, if you can collect the demographics, then you can have huge commercial exploitation of that data. That's one force which is driving it, where all the multinationals and others are involved. The other is more dangerous. It's a surveillance tool. We can track anybody, and you can target people. There are many other databases which are used for such purposes. In fact, in Nigeria, for example, I think the voter lists were used for targeting the Tutsi people. And back home in Gujarat, voter lists were used for finding out certain communities and attacking those places. So these databases in the hands of politicians and bureaucrats can be a very, very serious instrument of destruction. And one needs to be very, very careful about it. The illegality, the whole scheme is totally illegal. I filed a case in a lower court, very deliberately. I did not go in for appeal. It's a very beautiful, innovative legal strategy which we are following thanks to my advocate. In a lower court, you can drag these people in as witnesses. They have to admit the case. And they are running scared. In fact, some of you, when you get time, if you come and see in the court what's going on, they are running scared. You can see fear in their eyes. Because all the muck will start coming out. Even the appointment of Mr. Nilankani by the Prime Minister is illegal. Giving him a cabinet rank. Any government appointment has to follow a process or a procedure. The Prime Minister can, at whim, appoint a cabinet minister. In this case, he is not appointing a cabinet minister. He first appointed him as to head an authority. Then he gave him cabinet status. So the first one did not follow any procedure. The Prime Minister of this country is not a sultan who calls people his wazirs. No, there is a constitution. Article 75 of the constitution says a minister is appointed by the Prime Minister and, is recommended by the Prime Minister and appointed by the President. But he or she has to be a member of either House of Parliament within 6 months. And their pay and allowances are dictated by the Constitution. It lays down how many people can be ministers. Only 15% of the total strength of both houses can be ministers. So if that is so, how can you nominate anybody as a cabinet minister or give them rank and status? Can you have 100 people like that, or 20 or 5 or 1? What is the legality? So constitutionally it is not valid. There are other issues in legality, like how can they gather data? There is no provision in law to gathering this data, yours and my data. Can a policeman come and ask you, where do you live, what's your name, who are you? They can't, no. Unless there is something against you, you are a suspect, you are taken for interrogation, then there's a procedure to be followed. So there are protections and all these are being violated. So there's both deceit and illegality. When you come to corruption, the appointment of many of these contractors is totally corrupt. There are companies which are under prosecution in various countries and they have been given contracts here under prosecution for corruption. Under various acts, for example, the United States has got an Anti-Kickbacks Act. A company which is under prosecution there for the Anti-Kickbacks Act is appointed here as a contractor. And there are 209, there was originally, now there's slightly less, 209 empaneled registrars, the people who do the enrolling. Many of them are fictitious and bogus companies. All some relatives of Benami companies of politicians, bureaucrats and so on. And they are making money. A lot of fraud has been detected. Nothing is happened. Everything is pushed under the carpet. There is fraud which has happened in Bangalore, registered in various police stations, in Mysore, Bhopal, all these places, but nothing is happening. Pune, Bombay, all pushed under the carpet. Very dangerous. Lastly, the dangers which I told you, stacking and targeting. When your data is a number, your personality is linked to your bank account, your mobile phone, your college and school career, your medical records, it's a very dangerous thing in the hands of anybody. And I don't have much confidence in our ministers who watch porno movies in the assembly. And are these the people to whom we give our data? It's a very sad thing. In our country, this is happening. And there are other dangers. These foreign companies, we are giving our entire data to them. Why was the Devas deal or the UAV cancelled? And these same companies are in league with China and Pakistan. So it's a very dangerous thing to give our demographic data to those companies. It's in their hands. And you are dependent on them for so-called deduplication. Sorry. Now we come to so-called poverty, etc. This is a very sad picture. You can't eliminate poverty by UID or numbers or database and so-called financial inclusion. What will happen to this child? You have to change your economic policy. Our policies are totally wonky. They are based on wrong ideas which came from the 1960s, starting with Milton Friedman, a misinterpretation of Adam Smith, and in the 80s and 90s when Reagan and Thatcher promoted these economic policies. The so-called free market, unregulated, deregulated. The deregulation reached an extent where the whole thing melted down, the entire financial system. India was not affected because fortunately we have a certain amount of regulation still. But the people here are now trying to follow those policies. The economic policy is one of trickle-down economics. FDI in retail, POSCO, you call these multinational and you hope that the thing will trickle down to the poor. It doesn't happen. Then you must stop corruption, and corruption is at the highest levels. Unless that is stopped, no economic policy can work. And there is mass depravity. We don't even see people like this child. Do you see them? We are all happy listening to Radio 1 or FM or some such thing, very happy shopping in malls. We don't see the poverty around us. We have become immune to this. Therefore, we don't question anybody what you are doing. And then wrong solutions like this UID. That cannot work. Here is another picture of a mother and child. India has the largest number of hungry and malnutrited people and children in the world. The number of children who die before the age of 5 due to malnutrition is unimaginable. Instead of concentrating your money there and finding solutions to that, we are talking of database and numbers and so on. Every year, 80,000 crores worth of food grains are damaged in storage. And the reason is there is no adequate covered storage. The Supreme Court said, why don't you distribute this? The Prime Minister said, no, it's government policy, we can't distribute it. Why? Because it will increase inflation. Why can't you spend money on storages? No, we are giving to private storages and there is a proposal to increase the rental for the private storage. That is the kind of policy which they are advocating. Now this is where the PDS leakage is taking place. How do you know whether 10,000 tons have been destroyed or 5,000 tons have been damaged? Any amount can be written off as damaged. And you still continue. Will you spend, first will you construct the storage or will you number people? Where's your priority? It's a lopsided priorities. This is taken from one of the newspapers I gave in the Deccan Herald. There's another. This is in Bangalore. Rotting vegetables. The farmer cannot do anything with it. There's nobody to lift it. It's thrown onto the road and destroyed. And you and I go to buy in the market, we'll pay 50 rupees or 60 rupees a kilo. For a truck to enter Delhi with food grains or vegetables, 2,500 rupees have to be paid at each check post. Stop that. Not fingerprint and number the poor chap who goes to buy the vegetable. Hunger and poverty. This is the number one cause. India has got 1/3 of the world's hungry. 7,000 Indians die of hunger every month. And you want to fingerprint them? Pathetic. I mean, my blood boils when I see this. And this is something which I leave with you. This is what the UK Home Secretary, Theresa May, said when she scrapped the National ID Card Act in UK. That was the first act of the Cameron government in June 2009, as soon as they took over. And they said, the ID card represents the worst of government. It is intrusive bullying. It is an assault on personal liberty. We propose to do government business as servants of the people, not their masters. This whole thing of ID and database and so on is something which is intended to track people, to manipulate people. That is why it is intrusive bullying. It will do no good whatsoever. In fact, that's another statement we said. It will not do good. It cannot achieve its ends. It's a huge waste of money. Why are we doing it? I don't know. In fact, there's a study by London School of Economics, there's a study by Indian Institute of Management, all of which are trustless. And in fact, the only thing certain about a database, what is certain about a database? Absolutely, it will crash. The only thing, who said that? Thank you, sir. The only thing certain about a database is it will crash. And I'm not going into technology. I have a lot of information on the fingerprint technology. It has got, in a limited environment like access to this room. Yeah, with supervised access, you can do that. But otherwise, the problem with databases is 5 to 15% are the errors in the US itself for data entry. You can imagine what data entry is here. I went and filmed a particular enrollment center, the whole center, and talked to those people. I've got it on tape. It's unimaginable what those people are doing. Names are misspelled, age is different, address is different. Why? This afternoon, when the driver talked to me, I said, he asked me, "Sahab, ghar kidhar hai?" "Baswa Nagar." "Aapko malum hai na?" "Haan, Rajaji Nagar ke paas hai." So I told him, "No, that is Basweshwar Nagar, this is Baswa Nagar." When I went for the voter list, my name was first written into Kannada. So when it was retranslated into English, it was no longer Mathew, it was something else. These are the kind of errors which creep into any database. And I'll end with a small story, which is true. The head of the informatics department in the London School of Economics, his name is Ian Angel. He has written a lot about why these things, databases cannot work. He went to his bank, Barclays Bank, and he wanted to transact some business with his manager. So he gave his account number. The manager tapped his laptop and said, "Sir, this account belongs to a 14-year-old girl." So he said, "No, this cannot belong to 14. I've been having this account for the last 20 years. He said, "No, sir, but this belongs to a 14-year-old girl who is a professor in the London School of Economics." What happens is, you are no longer you in flesh and blood. You are what the database says what you are. And that is the danger. Thank you.
Following it up actually very efficiently, like Colonel Thomas said, and it's a great pleasure to be here. And my first time here, and I'm a scientist by training, and I work at Raman Research Institute. I'm a PhD in physics, and I work with some of the best technologies. So one thing is that case against UID is not a case against technology. Technology has its known benefits and we actually know them and see them around us all the time. So when you start making a case against UID, first thing that a lot of people tend to get biased about is that, well, these people do not like technology. So I'm one of the last persons you will ever find who is against technology because I have worked with some of the best technologies that are really available anywhere in the world. I travel across the world, see them at play, and I see their benefits. This is a slightly different thing. And like Colonel Thomas already said many things, and what I will try to prove to you in the remaining 20 minutes that I have here is that the game here, the game changer, the game here is not about corruption, game here is not about inadequacy, game here is not about people, higher up people not knowing what they're doing. In fact, it's a far more vicious game. It is deliberate because the people who actually are doing it, they are not unintelligent people. In fact, they are highly intelligent people who are carrying out this thing. So it's a deliberately vicious game, and that's what I'll try to explain to you in my talk. So first, some data about public distribution system. And one of the things one should always ask about any technology is the social setting in which it is introduced. A technology cannot be taken out. When it's taken out of context, and we do it all the time. In my work, when I talk to my colleagues, sometimes it's taken out of context. A computer is beneficial. Doesn't matter who's going to use it. Be it Indian Railways in colonial times, Green Revolution. When we go back, when we actually grow up, in our young days, we think, oh, you know, everything is positive. There was something positive about Indian Railways. Even Manmohan Singh went and said in England, it was positive. Everybody talks about Green Revolution as being a very positive thing. And when we start reading about it, slowly, we realize that there is something else. The beneficiaries, the intended beneficiaries are actually collateral beneficiaries. The real beneficiaries are somebody else, and people who are portrayed as the real beneficiaries are actually, sometimes a small fraction of them do gain, but that's collateral. You know the concept of collateral damage, this is collateral benefit. So let's look at PDS. For instance, one of the strongest case UID has tried to make, as Colonel Thomas also pointed out, is that it will improve inclusions and targeting of social services. Public distribution system is one thing they have talked about, and they have talked about, for instance, NREGA, the flagship program of rural development of the Indian government. So they start their case by saying PDS is inefficient, public distribution system. It surely is inefficient, that we know. For many papers, I'll refer to one paper, for instance, Ritika Khera has written a paper last year that up to 40 to 50% of the public distribution food grain is actually leaks. From the starting point, from the go downs of FCI to the time it reaches the person who is the intended beneficiary, it is gone somewhere. But there is a huge problem, the way it is portrayed in the media. The media will try to tell you, and I've read some articles actually, very surprised. Media will try to tell you that the villain in the story is the fair shop owner. This is the person who has caused this grain to disappear. First thing you must keep in mind is that the way this, and I would actually urge some of you to go back and look at the paper of Ritika Khera, for instance. The way this calculation is done, you can never ever tell the place where it disappeared. It can disappear from FCI, go down to anywhere else. And if we know the society that we live in, as Colonel Thomas also pointed out, the poorest are the least likely people, and the fair shop price owner is just above that poor. So most likely it happens elsewhere. We do not know where it happens. It's an inefficient system we need to fix. How do we want to fix it? Duplication of identity. The biggest claim UID proponents have is that there is duplication of identity. And what scale? The fact of the matter is we don't know. No one has ever tried to actually figure out. There are two states where we have some data from. Tamil Nadu. Tamil Nadu, they actually tried to introduce holograms and computerize public distribution system and found there is 2% of duplication. 2%? Well, it's not small, but it's not very large either. In Chhattisgarh, they found it to be 8%. We would like to make progress on this, of course. We would like to know more of at what level duplication occurs. But before we have made a case, in fact, the surprising thing about UID, and I'll probably read from. So UID, you should all go to the site, UIDDI, the authority of the UID authority. Their website has various articles on public, one of them is on the public distribution system. The only proof they have provided of leakage is this, one sentence. Let me read it. One state government unearthed 20 lakh bogus ration card in 2009. One sentence. That's all that they have to support their view, very strong view, that there is duplication of identity. If I write a paper like this, I lose my job. I mean, so it's clearly something, it's an incredible argument when you read it. Yes, they have some more evidence, and that is anecdotal. The anecdotal evidence goes like this, and one should always be wary of such evidence. A woman, poor looking woman, right, she's photographed there. She goes to a Russian shop, and she's told that, well, her Russian has already been sold. I'm sure it happened to her. But is this a piece of evidence you want to provide for getting every single Indian fingerprinted? Really? No. The reality is something else. For instance, one of the things about social inclusion or financial inclusion is that they will give bank accounts. As people who have been involved with programs like NREGA have pointed out, 83% of people under NREGA already have a bank account. The problem with not having bank account is not that these people are not able to access banks because they do not have registrars or they do not have identities. The problem is there are not enough banks in rural areas. In fact, if you go back in the last 20 years, rural areas have seen a dramatic decrease in the number of bank branches. And these people are actually trying to tell us they do not have bank account. Of course they do not have bank account. I worked in a DA institute in Allahabad actually. The Harish Chandra Research Institute, and because we are run by DAE, we opened a bank branch there actually. And it turns out this is in the middle of a village actually. This is oasis in the middle of a village. A lot of money and just surrounded by villages. And in 2 months there were 60,000 accounts there. So people really did need, and this is on the outskirts of Allahabad. So clearly if you open banks, there will be people who want to access these services. The point is there are no banks. And NREGA actually has done an extremely good job in that way without UID. They have managed to get 83%, and large fraction of them are actually in post offices. Post offices play the role of banks in India. Right? And where in some places they do not have, they have cash transfers, like in Tamil Nadu, that is for simplicity. And they actually write it in their documents. So the claim of bank accounts, financial inclusion, public distribution system, all of these claims are not quite valid. In fact, those claims are ridiculous beyond a point. One place where UID can actually make a difference is portability. And this is actually their big selling point. In India, there are 100 million internal migrants. There are 100 million people on the move in India at any given day. People who have left their villages, most of the time villages, and have migrated to cities to find work. And these are people who obviously have left their ration cards behind. Ration card is the sense of entitlement, and ration card is not portable from one place to another. UID is portable. So that is one of the selling points of UID, and actually this should be investigated in detail. If this is true, this is a good thing. It's a positive step forward. If we can provide meaningful rations to a migrant labor, I'm sure there are quite a few here in the neighboring area, right? That would be a positive step forward. But it is not. It is actually something else. And that is what one has to understand, the social setting in which it is being introduced. How do you enable services to these migrant laborers? Not by creating an identity. So, what are the various steps, for instance, if you want to reach services to people? What I have to discuss so far is the technical aspects of UID. What I have tried to convince you about is, most of the claims that they make are half-baked, if not totally wrong. Best lies are invariably those which contain an element of truth in them. And UID is one of them. So, how do you reach services to people? Two things. First, you have to identify the recipients. Second, you have a mode of delivery. It should be clear to all of us. How about identification of recipient? We talk about poor people in India. Do we really know how many poor people in India are? Do we even, can we even begin to guess? Let me give you a sense. The way of identifying poor in India, it was introduced way back in 1970s. I'll just very briefly touch upon it. Maybe I can discuss it later. It was based on something called calorific norm in 1970s. And that norm was followed, for instance, by the Planning Commission ever since. Planning Commission of late has been trying to sort of distance itself from that norm, the very norm that it introduced. There are people like Professor Utsav Patnaik, Ditnendres, who have pointed out that if you use this norm today to calculate number of poor in India, you'll get around 75% of India's population to fall in that category. 75. Government of India knew it, since early 2000, and they formed 3 different committees to look into this issue. First committee, Sengupta committee, was formed to look at informal labor and look at the number of people who are deserving poor. 77% of Indians spent less than 20 rupees a day in 2004-5 prices, 77%. Another committee, so there is politics of committees. Saxena committee was formed after Sen-Gupta committee report came out. 77 seemed too large to the government, so they formed another committee. And Saxena committee said 50%. And one of the members of Saxena committee was P. Sainath, who you might have heard. And he actually openly, he wrote a dissenting note on that this number is totally wrong, actually. We reached this number completely arbitrary. Third committee, Tendulkar committee. 37% of Indians they thought were below poverty line. This was actually, of all the committees, a 1% committee. All the other committees were committees in the usual sense of the word. You had drawn people from various strata of society. This was a 1% committee, said 37%. Government jumped at it and said, okay. Now, these numbers will give you a sense. UN comes up with its own estimates of poor people in India, and almost 80% of Indians spend less than 2.5, what are called purchasing power parity dollars, which is close to what Sen-Gupta committee report is also saying. Numbers we are dealing with are 50, 60, 70%, right? Over 40% of children in India have stunted growth, according to National Family Health Survey of 2006. Right? 70% of women are anemic. If you look at the iron consumption of a typical woman in India, it is less than what you actually need for a 6-year-old child from FAO. So I can go endlessly about this. That there is something terribly wrong. We have many multidimensional studies of poverty, for instance, where you take into account not just a few things, but multidimensional. And as Colonel Thomas also pointed out, India has more people malnourished than whole of sub-Saharan Africa combined. So clearly there's an issue here. Number of what you call poor is not a well-identified number. In fact, it is highly nebulous, it's highly diffuse, and in great probability, it is very large. So first of all, when you talk about targeting a service, you have to identify them. You can't identify them. Tendulkar committee report was actually castigated by the Supreme Court last year, and you might actually be aware of it. The Supreme Court told the government to come up with another measure of poverty. If somebody spends 32 rupees a day in Delhi, you know that you can't make 2 ends meet. You can barely go to your place of work in this much of money. And they did submit an affidavit. And that affidavit should be read. I'll urge some of you to read it. 20 minutes is not enough time. I'll not even quote from it. And again, it's full of what you can call downright deceit. What is the mode of delivery? You're trying to target a service. How do you target a service? You can do a universal targeting, right? At one point, Indian government said, public distribution system is universal. All of us could have ration cards. In fact, all of us have used it probably at one point or another, especially me who's not that young. We have used ration card when I was quite young. But not in the recent past, because like many of the services, like I already said, public distribution system has a problem. It's not the best service that is available. Then they went on to this targeting from 1990s. So they created categories like below poverty line, above poverty line, and there are Antolya, there are many, many categories. One thing that proliferates are these categories actually, which they create every other day. So first of all, they are trying to target a population where targeting is incredibly difficult. One would say almost impossible. Why would somebody want to? An intelligent person, these are intelligent people, let's never forget. So they're doing it deliberately. Then there are other clear signs. You target beneficiaries, but what about essential commodities? They are being deregulated. If you have been following news in the last 6 or 7 years, you find deregulation of fuel, you find deregulation of food procurement and distribution, something which is completely, almost totally controlled by the government. There is impending deregulation of sugar. It's being discussed as we speak. And if sugar is one of the most important PDS commodity actually, what does deregulation do? What is deregulation? It's a very fancy word actually, deregulation. Deregulation means, so far the government bodies at state and federal level, the private sector will sell it at the prices they wish to. Many people actually contend deregulation can increase prices also. Why do you always need to increase prices? If last 4 years they didn't go high, the prices of food commodities have gone up. Not only that, people are just completely de-averaged. You can completely average how to eat and scale around. So deregulation is going on, and on a very large scale is going on. And it is very clear that in such a deregulated market, poor cannot access services. Because for poor, it is not about decrease or increase of price or long term only. with fluctuation. You and I, you should compute something. The fraction of your budget that is spent on food each month. It can be 20%, maybe 25%. For most of it, it will be less than 10%. That balance, you can do it. You know what the average for India is according to NSS survey 2009-10? More than 50%. We live in a country where the average person, now the average of course is higher than people like us, and of course there are people above us. What does another million understand? The average for India is 50%, 57% in rural areas, or 40% in urban areas. There are people in this country, the laboratory works outside, so it's 70%. You increase the price of food commodity slightly on one day, his children might have to go hungry. It should be clear to all of us. What that person can't take is fluctuation. It's not just about low or high prices, but the fluctuation of the prices. Right? That person has very low elasticity, I will say in economic terms, to price fluctuation. That person just can't take it. The prices fluctuate, you go under. You can't manage. Deregulation has done exactly that. It has created not only high prices, which may not have been expected, but almost certainly it has created fluctuating prices, which most people are not able to take. That's where UID comes in. UID tells you to London Linicani. So clearly these two things are linked. And of course, there was a news report only yesterday where they had a meeting and they very pompously announced that, well, I mean, we are going to have UID in these many states. They have earmarked some states in the last 6 months or so, where they are going to actually, because UID has to be really expanded in all those states before you can start cash services. And UID can enable it, a cash service, because there's a bank account number on it. So the idea is a poor person, migrant laborer, now we come back to the migrant laborer. You can't get him rations because you're anyway trying to dismantle that entire thing. What you try to get to this person is not ration, but cash. Who does it benefit? There are many, many issues about cash transfers. People have pointed out, for instance, that there is gender-related issue, that the man at the house will get it and will drink it. Well, it's possible. Women will suffer. But there are other issues. Who benefits from cash transfers? In what kind of market can cash transfer work? One market which is deregulated. Government says, I'm not going to procure food, I'm not going to distribute food, I'm not going to provide health services, I'm not going to provide education. You know what? I will give you money for all of these. Something a month. And there is an amazing insurance scheme government is working these days in Karnataka. You might have heard about it. They are trying to get health services to people. How? You know what the old model would be? Okay, you go to the hospital and they will treat you free. No. They are giving money to the insurance companies to buy insurance for these people so that they can access private services. See my point? That's a different model. Right? So who gets the money? The insurance company gets the money. Right? This guy is provided service. Well, maybe, maybe not. But the model, it is this model that the UID is trying to actually push forward. And that's where, if you want to say the dog is buried, it is a subsidy to the corporate world. It is a subsidy to that part of the world, knowing fully well that we are going to deregulate over a period of time. We are going to deregulate all these services, dismantle all these services systematically. In such a way, but at the same time, Guinean government is well aware that without a social network of any kind, you will have dead people on the streets of Bangalore. See, in a country where people spend 50% in food, where a laborer spends 70%, fluctuation will kill him slowly. That's okay. But you see, if people start dying here on the street, you'll have a problem. So government knows the social service has to be provided, only they want to change the model. And the model, so that's where I use the word vicious. It is deliberate vicious. Because the very fact, and in fact government realized it. So I have to tell you this. In 2006, government, they want this model, so they didn't go to procure. So private sector went to procure food. And what did they do with the food? Deregulation also means you can export it, so they exported it. They exported wheat, they exported pulses. 3 months later, the price of pulse went up by a factor of 2. You might recall some of you. Factor of 2. Price of wheat went up by some 40-50%. Government panicked. They imported food. And they imported at a price which is 2 times the price they might have given to the farmer to procure in the first place. Subsequent to that, the government has acted wisely, more wisely. They banned export of wheat for long periods. Export of pulse is still banned in India. Also the rice for some part they have banned. Next year, they increased the procuring price. So they went back to the old model, say, okay, let me procure this year again. And of course, farmers came to give their crops. Procurement is good. The food distribution also increased as a result of that. In fact, in the last 4 years, government has distributed more food than they ever have through the public distribution system. The very system they want to dismantle through cash transfer scheme is a system they are forced to adopt against their own policies, because they know there could be large-scale social unrest if they don't do this. So the implications of something like UID are very, very clear. It is a scheme to enable cash transfers. It is a scheme to get entitlement to people. Entitlements will be there, but in a way where the biggest gainer is going to be the private corporate sector. That is what the government is going to do. And it is very unlikely, given the social setup in which we live, that they will succeed, at least not in the immediate sense, in immediate times. Because like I said already, they had to go back on their earlier policy. But we'll have to wait and see how far they can go with it. But one thing is clear, this is yet another example, like I said, Indian Railways or Green Revolution, that the intended beneficiaries are really not the ones who are portrayed to be the beneficiary in public documents or the corporate press. Thanks a lot.
Collect public information?
That they came out with the National Identification Authority of India Bill, NIA Bill. That bill was placed before Parliament, and by lobbying with the MPs, we managed to get it to the Standing Committee on Finance, which was headed by Mr. Yashwant Sinha. There were 31 members there, and some of us who are campaigning against this evil wrote to each one of them. We wrote to every member of Parliament, both Rajya Sabha and Lok Sabha, and that bill has been trashed. The committee has said that this bill has to be amended, has to be changed, and the government must come out with a new bill. They went a step beyond. They gave several reasons why the UID project itself, which is not normal. When Parliament refers a bill to a standing committee, the committee will only look at the clauses of the bill. In this case, they examined the entire project, and they've used very harsh words. They have said it is directionless. It lacks clarity. It will not help the poor. In fact, they quoted exactly what I had written to them, and I'm proud of that. I said, the problem, the assumption of the UID is that the lack of identity denies you service. That's an assumption. It has not been tested by any means. It is not the lack of identity. There are two things. One, the decision for eligibility is left to the hands of criminals. Criminals means those who are corrupt or otherwise. There are various kinds of criminality. The second is the total powerlessness of a starving person. So they are at the mercy of these people. That is what denies them access of services. See, you and I will not be arrested by a policeman that easily. Because he looks at our clothes, he knows that we have got some access to law. A poor person will simply catch hold of and trash them, because they have no access to justice. The same applies to access to any service. So it is totally illegal. This bill is not, I don't think it will come in the near future.
I have a question. Okay, now, so far I have not registered for the UID, but what are the implications of not doing it at all? I mean, more and more of the agencies are asking for what is your UID. Like if you want to open a bank account number, now they're asking what is your UID number. And so many other, I don't know about other things, but so far I have faced one problem with the bank. They said, where's your UID number?
Which bank was that?
State Bank of India.
Okay.
So this is where is it going to? I mean, how far can you resist getting yourself a UID? This is my question.
It is up to each individual how much he or she wants to resist something which is wrong. If you don't want to resist a person who's asking for your bribe, then it's up to you to pay the bribe and manage it, but you can resist it. Now, banks cannot, there's no law under which they can ask for a UID number. And you should write to the RBI. You just threaten the bank, he will immediately open your account. Ask him under what law are you insisting on a UID number. And I would suggest those who are by mistake, try this experiment, have registered for the UID, have given your fingerprints, ask them that you want your data deleted and see what response you get. They cannot. UK collected the data of only 15,000 of their citizens. When the act was scrapped, they spent £2.5 million to destroy that data. This data can be misused. It's in the hands of all kinds of small private parties. It's a very dangerous thing. See, this fingerprint game is very, very dangerous. I have got a paper here. It's, I think, came in a couple of years back, which reports the news of a jeweler in JP Nagar who was arrested for receiving stolen jewels. He was kept in the police station the whole day. And the police people were bargaining with him on some amount of bribe to let him go. The writer in the police station is the guy who records evidence. He was the intermediary between the inspector and the victim. And he told him that I'll put your name, I'll take your fingerprints, I'll put it into the Gundas or criminals register if you don't pay the bribe. Now your fingerprints are available with these people. There are many issues. Now, all of you have left your fingerprints here. Anybody can take it and use it for various purposes. Your fingerprint, if it is used for authentication, once it is compromised, you can do nothing. Unlike a password, you can change. What will you do with your fingerprint? See, the driving force behind it is so-called security companies which are trying to cash in on the paranoia created by terrorism. In fact, our UID project, one of the deceit in it is two things. One is, if it is meant for the poor, why are they asking your UID number in the state bank? Ask him, is he going to give you a ration card or a subsidized LPG? So why are they collecting the data of the middle class or the higher class people? They try to equate it with the SSN. SSN is totally different. Those who have been to the United States will know that. SSN guarantees you money when you don't have a job. UID guarantees nothing. SSN has no fingerprints. If SSN is similar to UID, then Bush would not have passed the Real ID Act to incorporate fingerprints into driving licenses. That has been opposed by all the states there, so Obama is not implementing it. The second element in the deceit is, this thing started with the Kargil war, where a very foolish committee recommended that if you have a national ID card, then you can prevent cross-border militancy. Since I have been on the borders of this country, I know that a militant doesn't come with an ID card. He comes with a Kalashnikov rifle and maybe a couple of grenades. It is ridiculous to imagine that you can prevent cross-border terrorism or militancy or anything by having ID cards for people. Okay. They tried it out under the recommendations of this committee in 3 states, in Bengal, in Kerala, and in Gujarat. In Bengal and Kerala, we are all militant fellows, it failed. In Surat, in Gujarat, it succeeded because that's a place which is very highly conscious of identity and who's coming in and going out. It's a border district of Pakistan. It succeeded there. It was lying dormant there. Somebody told Advani that this is very useful in identifying the Bangladeshi illegal immigrants in Assam. So he amended the Citizenship Act, which is also illegal, to create the National Population Register. And you and I, all of us have violated that. We are supposed to go and register it. We don't even know where to register. And because of, if you don't register, you pay 1,000 rupees fine. And if you still don't register, you can be imprisoned for 3 months. That's the law today. It's a law which is the UID doesn't have law. The NPR has a law. But that is also totally illegal. And the purpose was militancy. And that is hidden. Now they have divided the cake, half to UID, half to NPR. That is a ridiculous, like 600 million, 600 million. I don't know what to do. I mean, it's mind-boggling what these guys are up to. And they're spending your and our money. The UID budget started with 1,950 crores this year. Within 3 months, Mr. Nilankani asked for 15,000 crores. The finance ministry woke up and said, what is this going on? Now they have given him 8,800 crores. Our estimation is to set up this thing will cost 1.5 crores. It's going to be a scam. And I will request you people like this gentleman, if you want, I'm running a campaign against this. First of all, even if I don't run the campaign, it will collapse on its own. But after a lot of abuse and misuse and data all over the place. Because it's totally impractical. Professor talked of the portability and mobility. It just can't work. See, first of all, these are laborers. Their fingerprints are noisy. You can't collect it. Yesterday I was in a garage. I was looking at the hands of the mechanics there. On his way back home, will he put his hand on a scanner and collect his rations? It's full of grease and muck. So these laborers and old people like me, fortunately SBI can't ask my fingerprints because I don't have any. I'm too old. Elderly people, laborers, their fingerprints are very bad. People with eye defects, even light affects your iris. There's a whole lot of data available. Please search the net on all these kind of identity stuff. It's all total nonsense. In very controlled environments, it can work to a limited extent. Very famous case.
See, you might get some money as a social service, but the very people who get money for social, these are people who also are in need of loans most of the time. So you see, this is one way microfinance companies are looking for these databases. Like he pointed out, these databases are going to be sold. How do we know they're not going to be sold to these companies?
No, it's a policy.
It's a policy.
Nilankani has said, AADHAAR platform is open for application development.
So this is actually going to be sold. So I'm an NGO starting a microfinance, go to an area. I want a database of all the people who are likely to be recipients of this kind of, or maybe looking for microfinance because these are very small sums of money. Well, I have a ready database. Oh yeah, this is really linked. I mean, because you see, the big thing is that, like the Facebook example that he gave, Facebook is a very profitable enterprise. How? What do they sell? They sell information on people's behavior, right? And it sells. Companies like it. So in this context, in UID, one of the people who will actually want it, if security services is one, the NatGrid idea, the others would be these microfinance NGOs. And it seems up to 97% of these NGOs actually work in microfinance in rural areas. So very, very large fraction of NGOs actually are linked to microfinance these days. So there is no question. And I'm sure like UID will also enable some public-private partnership with these kind of people. I mean, I do not have data for that, but I think I've heard some news that they're going to start it. I mean,
Microfinance in India, if I may say, Professor, is actually usury. It's terrible.
yes, it is usually.
At the end, the person gets 50 or 60% or 40% of the interest.
The minimum is around 35%.
They do not go directly. See, I know a microfinance based in Bangalore who has a line of credit of 200 crores from ICICI Bank. Now, he gives it in turn to NGOs. The NGOs in turn have franchisees. The franchisees have agents. Finally, it lands up at 40 or 50%. He pays an interest of 8% to ICICI Bank. And he gives to the NGO at about 12%. He has got a 3 to 4% spread. But the poor person gets it at 40 or 35%. Now, if you want a good, successful microfinance, you must look at the model of Grami, Yunus Mohammed in Bangladesh. That is a good microfinance system where you lend directly to the person. A bank lends directly to the person in need, and these are self-help groups. And then they come out of their poverty. 7 million people have been brought out of poverty in Bangladesh. And the directors of this bank are all poor women. When Yunus Muhammad received the Nobel Prize, all these women went with him to the palace in Sweden.
I have one last question. Last day when I was in my village, there was mass frenzy for people queuing up for UID and people coming from far off places. There's a perception among villagers that if you don't take UID, you may not get government services. My village is being displaced under them. So people even more feel that we may lose on compensation. So there is a perception built among people that it is necessary. And it is making more and more villages more dependent on government, don't you think so?
See, because the point is if you go to the UID site, they will tell you it's voluntary. See, that is one point they always discuss. It is not. What you are saying is it's not. Because when you start linking this kind of a thing to essential services, then people need. If you say you will not get ration without UID, okay, you can't open a bank account without a UID. Or any other subsidized services that you might access, or even, for instance, getting an LPG, even unsubsidized LPG, like they were trying to bring out this rule that you need a UID. So clearly people will be forced. So it is not voluntary, it is actually forced. And this perception is correct probably, right? Because they might start doing it very soon, if they already haven't. Because I think right now their problem is, I don't think they have that equipment on the other side, where they can verify UID. That is their problem. Okay. So they are issuing UID right now, huh?
Sorry, one last comment I want to make. I talked about the SBI thing. Why did they open the bank account without the UID? They will.
Okay. No, they will. I mean, because that's against law. They can't do that. No, but for many people who are like, for instance, NREGA, there they might actually link it to, and they have been desperately trying to link it to. In fact, there is a paper published by some people who have been involved with NREGA that UID should be kept out of it. In fact, they don't want UID to interfere. So there you get cash benefits, right? So if you link it to UID, then it's forced.
The perception, if I may say so, is part of the deceit. They create this. In fact, the American is on record saying UID is voluntary, but service providers may ask for it. It will become ubiquitous. And in my case, their lawyer came and said, it's voluntary. If the plaintiff doesn't want it, he need not take it. So I have produced a circular. You need UID number. When I went to Mysore and visited an UID enrollment center, I interviewed a person who had come from a neighboring village. I asked him, why did he come? He was told he is a BPL fellow and he has got a scooter. He came to take a UID number because the RTO there told him without a UID number he cannot transfer the scooter when he sells it. Then we raised that issue and the RTO retracted that statement. So probably these people think you can fool all the people all the time. They're mistaken. You can fool a lot of people all the time, but some of the idiots like me cannot be that easily fooled. And we must resist it. That's the lesson from this. We can talk and go away. Must resist this evil. I will go away. I've got probably 3, 4, I'm 75 years old. A few more years to live as the Lord gives. But you young people, it will affect your lives. It's a terrible thing. It's evil personified. Resist it with all your strength. Stop it. Without that, you will suffer. All kinds of things will happen.
Can UID help to reduce the upwards?
Yeah.
Yes, it's very equal.
Yeah, I suppose like that.